it's Mena. Welcome back to my channel, or if this is the very first video you're seeing of me, then welcome to my channel. Please do hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already. I post Monday through Saturday, and today in this video I'm doing my top 10 differences between knitting and crocheting. Now, I know a lot of people get knitting and crocheting screwed up and they think they're the same thing because both hobbies involve yarn, and I think that's why people get confused because both hobbies involve yarn, but crocheting and knitting are two different things. But I'm going to tell you the top 10 reasons why they're completely different and stuff. And if you guys do any of these hobbies, let me know which one you do in the comments down below. Like if you knit or crochet, let me know which one you do. And if you guys find knitting easier than crocheting, or if crocheting is easier than knitting. But for me, I personally find knitting much easier than crocheting because I find it's easier to keep track of your rows and stitches and stuff like that. But if you guys find crocheting easier than knitting, that's completely fine. We're all different. So I'm going to talk about the top 10 differences between knitting and crocheting. And I'm going to get started. So number one on my list had to be knitting is with needles and crocheting is with the hook. So the difference is when you knit, you have to knit with 2 needles. I have a pair of size 7 double pointed needles here. No, regular needles. I'm sorry, I cannot talk today. I have size 7 regular needles. I'm just showing you guys. So this is mainly what's done when you knit, is like 2 needles or needles and stuff like that. And then for each project is like mostly 2 needles if you're knitting flat. But if you're knitting a different way, I'm going to tell you what's going to be next. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't talk today. And then this is what crocheting is done with. This is a plain crochet hook. Crochet hook is just one hook and stuff like that. So that's the difference, is knitting's with 2 needles and crocheting is just with 1 hook. Number 2 on my list had to be knitting is with 2 or 4 needles, or in crocheting's with just 1 hook. So when you knit you have to have 2 needles for each project, because how are you going to get the project done with just 1 needle? Or sometimes you'll have to do double pointed needles, which is right here, depending on if you're knitting in the round or knitting flat. If you're knitting flat, you can knit with double or circular needles. I just personally knit more with straight needles, because basically just in case, because that's what I'm used to. But if I'm knitting something to accommodate stitches, I will use these things and stuff. So basically knitting is just done with mainly 2 or 4 needles. It usually depends on what the project calls for, excuse me. And then you have a crochet hook right here, and this is like what crocheting is basically done with. It's just 1 hook mainly. Number 3 on my list would have to be the V's are straight down in knitting, while the V's are horizontal in crocheting. So I don't technically have an actual, I think I have a crochet project somewhere here. Oh yeah, I do, but it doesn't have V's on it. So where did I put that little doily? Biscuits and gravy? I don't know where the doily went. But so if you look right here, the V's right here are straight down in knitting. Sorry if you can't really see that, it's really bright. The V's are straight down, but with crocheting, if I can find that little doily, oh, never mind, I'll just probably use my little baby blanket right here. So if you look right, there's no V's right here, but there's one at the top. The V's right here, you can't really see that. V's, if you can see that, no, you can't really see that, I'm sorry, I don't know where my doily went. The V's right here, those are more horizontal on top, so that's like the difference, is the V's are vertical here, like straight down, and then the V's are more sideways. I hope that made sense. Oh, there's my doily. So this is what the V's look like. They're more sideways, they're more, whoops. They're more like sideways, if you could see that, as opposed to the knitting ones when they're straight down. Did I mess up my lighting on my camera? Let me check. No, it's fine. I just need to get rid of that square. I'll just ignore the square if you can see it. Anyway, I might be distracting, but sorry. Yeah, sorry, so that's basically what it is like the V's are different and stuff like that. So where was I? I'm sorry. Okay, so number 4 is like crocheting is done in the... So knitting is done with circular double-pointed needles, and crocheting is done more in a spiral. So when you knit, you have more like a tube. Like this I made in a tube. I knitted it with circular needles, which I have right that was weird, sorry. Right here, I knitted it with a pair of circular needles for this beanie, so it could be knitted in the round. But with crocheting, you just have to do it with a hook. And I have no idea where my sewing... Oh, there's my sewing machine drawer. Like this, I just did in the round flat. With crocheting, when you're crocheting in the round, you have to do it flat. So it ends up like a circle. So I hope that made sense. And it's done usually more in a spiral, or sometimes you have to join depending on your pattern. It's done more in a spiral and stuff, and it's like... That's one thing I hate about crocheting in a spiral is finding my end. And that's a fun fact, sorry. So basically knitting's just done more 3D, and then crocheting's just done flat. Number 5 on my list would have to be the crochet stitches are taller, and then knitting stitches are shorter. So I don't know if you can see the difference, but this thing, even though it's like smaller, the stitches are a bit taller. Wow, that rhymed. The stitches are a bit taller than the stitches in here. Here, they're shorter. So this, compared to this, even though I use bigger needles, the stitches are much taller. I don't think you can tell the difference, but it's just depending on the height of the crochet project you're actually doing and what stitch you're doing. Number 6 on my list would have to be crochet stitches are sort of tight, while knit stitches are loose. So I think this depends on your tension and stuff like that. Like when you first start crocheting, your stitches are a bit tight and stuff like that, because you kind of got to keep a loose tension, which is kind of the hard thing about crocheting, is keeping a loose tension because you got to hold it to fit your hook, but you got to make sure you're not holding it. Pay attention to make sure you're holding it loose enough to get your hook through, but you can't hold it so tight that you can't get your hook through. But if you crochet a little too tight, your stitches are a bit more tight. So that's what I've noticed with crochet, is the stitches are a bit more tight. And then with knitting, I just find it much easier. With knitting, it's like, even though it fits around the needle, the stitches fit around the needle, they're still pretty loose. That's what I find and stuff like that. So if you guys don't agree with me, that's totally fine. I just personally think crochet stitches are more tight. Knit stitches are looser than crochet. Number 7 on my list is knitting is done more in a tube, while crocheting is done flat, and the round is done flat. So this doily, I crocheted flat because I did it in even though I did it in a round, I just did it more flat. So most crochet projects are done flat rather than in a tube like knitting is. Like this I made in a tube with circular needles. This I just did with one hook, and it was all done flat and stuff. Because when you knit in the round, you go in like a tube when you're using circular needles. But if you crochet, you mostly crochet your circle flat. I hope that's making sense. So let me know if I'm not making sense. I'm sorry, I'm really trying. Right, because like you have to increase and stuff like that to make your circle bigger sometimes. And the more you increase, the flatter your circle kind of gets. Number 8 on my list is there are times when you have to change needle size in a pattern, and crocheting is done with just one hook size. So let's say you knit, you are knitting with size 8 needles right here. And sometimes a pattern will call for a needle change, and it'll call for like size 7. And you have to change to size 7 needles and stuff. So what I've noticed is like some patterns in knitting will call for a change of needle sizes depending on what you're knitting, depending on what you knit actually. actually, because some patterns will just have you use the same needle size. Some patterns will have you change the needle size. It just depends. And then with crocheting, you don't really have, I've noticed this a lot with crocheting. It doesn't call for a certain change of hook size. You use the same hook throughout the entire pattern. You don't change the size at all, which I find interesting with crocheting, because like, which I find super interesting is it's all done with one hook, while knitting sometimes you have to change needle size. I don't know, it's really weird, but that's basically kind of strange. Sorry, I can't really talk, I'm trying. And then number 9 would have to be, for knitting you increase, you knit front and the back and then back, or pick up a bar in between, but in crocheting you have to crochet twice into one stitch. So basically with knitting, it's pretty easy to increase. You have to, knitting and crocheting increases are super easy. All you just have to do is, like, for knitting you either knit front and back or pick up like a little bar in between your stitches, and then you just knit through the back. And then crocheting, you just crochet 2 stitches into one stitch. So that's the difference is knitting you increase either front and back or pick up a bar, and then crocheting you just do it just do it in the same stitch twice, depending on what your pattern calls for. So that's like one of the differences and stuff like that. Number 10 on my list would have to be knitting your rows are straight, while crocheting you have to add another chain. So when you crochet, it subtracts stitch. So knitting does not subtract stitches unless you drop a stitch or you decrease. Unless you drop a stitch or you decrease. So, but with crocheting, you have to add another chain, because like when you turn your chains, let's say you crochet, you have about 20 crochet stitches, and then you crochet backwards, but you only crochet 19. And then, but if you crochet backward to the other side, you only have 18 stitches because you're decreasing. So when you crochet, and so when you're trying to crochet straight, you have to add a chain, an extra chain to turn and stuff like that. So I hope that what I'm saying is making sense. So you either chain 1 or chain 2, depending on what your pattern calls for, and you just crochet all the way down, but when you start your new row, you have to chain 2, because crocheting decreases because of your turning chain. But when you're knitting, you don't have to add another chain. You just knit and knit and knit, because it doesn't decrease stitches. Okay, so those are my top 10. I hope that made sense and stuff like that. So let me know if any of that made sense. So that was my top 10 differences between knitting and crocheting. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sorry this was long, but thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. I post Monday through Saturday, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!